I'm here today to speak with Brenda James, former Boston police officer. Dating back to 2010, Officer James has been battling with the Boston Police Department in the city of Boston to understand the truth behind why she no longer holds a badge. A series of administrative mishaps have led to a long paper trail of misappropriation against Officer James that, as of today, September 21st, 2020, still has not been resolved. 10 years of fighting this battle has led to Officer James being victimized and ostracized, but still not protected. Being verbally assaulted and erased from the conversation and still not protected. Sexually assaulted and still not protected. As a Black female officer protecting the streets of Boston, endangering her life to protect her community, one has to ask, who is protecting her? Her fellow officers, her fellow colleagues of color, her supervisors, their superiors, the Boston Police Union, family, friends? After 10 years of searching for the answer in hopes of building support to fight the systematic injustices against her, Officer James knew the answer was her. She had to protect herself. And this is why she is here with us today to tell her story. Officer James.
Yes.
So tell us, how long did you work for the Boston Police Department?
I worked for the Boston Police Department since 1994 up until 2015.
Okay. All right. So you had a long run.
I had a long run.
All right. And how was your relationship with the community? Like, how did you engage with the community? How did they see you? And which district and community did you live in?
I worked primarily in District 13,
Okay.
and that's in Jamaica Plain.
Okay. Thank you.
So I had an excellent relationship with the community. In fact, the initiative of community policing became introduced in the 1990s when I got on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started off as a beat officer. I started interacting with kids at the Boys and Girls Club. And my captain at the time noticed what my niche would be. She noticed my talents in terms of interacting with students and children and, you know, my concern for working with families. So she recommended me not only for community service, but to also be a juvenile officer.
Okay. So you had a really good relationship with the community.
I had a really good relationship.
Okay.
And more importantly, I was entrusted by the police department to be one of the faces of community policing.
Okay, which means, as you just said, obviously they seen your accolades, they seen how well you were relating, and they wanted to support you.
Correct.
At that time.
They wanted to support me at that time. That's right.
At that time.
At that time.
But we'll get into that, because my next question is, how was your relationship with your fellow officers? I mean, you talked about your superiors, they seen you, they wanted to support you at that time. So how was your relationship with your fellow officers? Did you feel anything other than support?
When you're given a special assignment, it does separate you sometimes from your counterparts. Mm-hmm. Because they don't really understand, you know, you're not doing the same things that they're doing.
Okay.
And it was a special position in terms of the political aspect of it. I was doing speaking engagements. I was going into the schools. I had a girls group. I was going into DYS, detention facility, doing roundtable discussions. So your workload and your assignment looks far different than anyone else's, and sometimes people don't understand that.
Okay. Okay.
With that said, I'm always pretty friendly, but I kind of did things the way that I was supposed to do things, and it created a little bit of separation.
Okay, all right, for your position.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
So I worked upstairs, they worked downstairs.
Okay, all right, so you stuck
literally.
stuck to what you had to do, and you felt at times that there was some support, but at times that there was some separation.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. So one of the first incidences that I read throughout the report that led to like this uphill journey was your superior officer incorrectly filing your medical paperwork, right? So you had an injury, and you can correct me, I just want to try to sum this up. You had an injury, and you were to go out injured on leave. But on the paperwork, they marked you down AWOL, absent without leave, which is a big difference. So can you talk to us about how this kind of like seemingly small mistake then like.
Well, it's a huge mistake.
Yeah,
it's a huge
snowballed.
mistake because when we talk about abuse of authority, these are the kind of actions that are inexcusable because of the impact that it has.
I know.
So
but that's why I was saying seemingly small, right?
Correct.
Because then it eventually snowballed into you being discharged.
Correct.
Which means like this was something that could have been corrected.
It could have been
changed
corrected
at that time.
The major point
right?
is that it could have been corrected and it should have been corrected. I eventually did more work on the streets. I was chasing after 3 suspects, apprehended them. Allegedly, they had a gun, but they did not have a gun. But I sustained a tear to my ACL and my meniscus.
Okay.
So I had surgery. I was rehabbing. It was an on-the-job injury. I had no issues with whether or not I was injured on the job. I went through rehab. The rehab was a little arduous because they didn't give me a brace that I needed, and all these different things happened medically. But in terms of the procedure and the paperwork and everything was done correctly. Somewhere along the lines,
on your end, everything was done.
Everything was done correctly.
Okay, and then so what happened when the paperwork then needed to go through?
Well, when there was an agreement for me to return in December of 2011, 1 month prior to that, a newly transferred captain decided he was going to arbitrarily change my status from out injured to AWOL, which would have made it difficult for me to return.
Okay, you say arbitrarily, so did he ever state a reason?
He never stated a reason, and he didn't have a paper trail. And again, this is the abuse of authority that you don't want.
Okay.
There's protocol and there's procedure that needs to be followed. And he arbitrarily just did something that would be harmful to me because he felt like it, for whatever reason.
Okay. And this is where the story begins.
This
right?
is where
right?
the story. This is where this phase of the story begins.
Exactly. So that's why I wanted to start there, because it's like, okay, so we have no reason why this particular situation occurred. Okay?
Correct.
So then you are to come back, right? And
I am scheduled to return.
Okay. So talk to us about what happened when you were scheduled to return and come back, because then you had another incident that continued to, like I keep saying, snowball the situation. Right?
Yes, the whole situation snowballed because abuse of authority was never checked at the door. And it was never checked at the door because I'm a black female. If I was a white female, it would have been checked at the door. And I think that's our reality as a society. We understand the difference in the desperate treatment and when these things go on, when it's checked at the door and it's stopped, versus when it's allowed to snowball into something bigger, more impactful. And so here I have paperwork that slates me due back in December of 2012 and 2011. He carries me absent without leave in November as if I've never existed. I'm just gone. That's what absent without leave means. It means that
nobody knows where
I am.
Not on the job. Yep.
And the ridiculousness of it is that they're paying for me to be in rehabilitation. I'm scheduled to return with signatures and with releases in December of 2012.
So then there's paperwork to track exactly where you are.
There's paperwork
to saying nobody knows.
That's
where
correct.
You are.
There's there's paperwork to track where I am, and there's paperwork to track when I'm due back.
Okay.
More importantly.
Okay.
And so he arbitrarily does this. It doesn't interfere with me finishing my rehab because there's no official paper trail. There's no clearances from any doctors. I have to return when I'm medically cleared.
So you were medically cleared and able to go back?
Eventually, yes, as scheduled in
So
December.
talk to us about once you were medically cleared and you were able to go back. There was another incident with another superior officer. Or was this with the
same superior officer?
The same superior officer.
Right.
So talk to us about when you went to go speak with him about the incident, or he came to speak with you. I don't want to say it the wrong way.
I went to speak to him about it, and he was very nonchalant. And he asked me if I was going to file a state claim because when they changed my status to absent without leave, they also took my wages illegally.
Okay.
They took my wages by putting 40 hours in the system and taking 40 hours out.
Okay.
And I think that for purposes of this, we lose kind of sight of the fact that when we get into too many intricate details, we kind of lose the fact that there was abuse of authority that was impactful, that put my life and my situation on the trajectory that was leading me out of the door.
No, absolutely.
Right?
It was leading to
It was
taking
leading.
away your livelihood.
That's
right?
correct.
And
that's
so
correct.
That's why I'm happy that you just made the statement that by
Right.
doing that, and that's what I wanted to get to, right? By putting you down AWOL, now you're not getting the wages that you deserve, right?
Correct.
So that's why I wanted to speak to the next incident, right? So we have that, right? That's that abuse of power, right? Which is, in my opinion, clear, right? But that's just my opinion. So then you have this next incident with him where you were supposed to have a conversation. And so what happened?
Well, because the AWOL never got addressed,
yep.
I returned back to work as scheduled, got cleared properly as I'm supposed to, in accordance with our rule.
Mm-hmm.
I returned back to work, and now it's a cat and mouse because his actions were never addressed.
Okay.
I'm still out of wages during the weeks that he carried me.
And you're still in the process of trying to recoup these wages, correct?
I was not.
You was not. Okay.
I complained to the union, and then I decided that it was a battle I didn't want to choose. So the problem became his more than mine, because if in fact I did want to pursue the loss of wages,
you had every right to.
I had every right to. Through a state claim, triple damages. There's things I could have done, but I decided to work, keep my head down, handle my business, and I worked for 6 months. For 6 months of looking over my shoulder, 6 months of trying to figure out why this man carried me. He changed my status. When I say carried, I'm saying that he changed my work status. Yeah. That language may be confusing to people because I'm speaking as a police officer.
No,
he changed my duty status
yeah.
to absent without leave.
Okay, so let's get to the next incident that occurred, because this is when it really.
Well, 6 months went by.
You know what I'm saying? You're working for 6 months.
I'm working for 6 months, and he arbitrarily shows up at 1 o'clock in the morning, off of his shift, on my shift, past roll call. I was assigned to a rapid response unit. It was all wrong. It was all wrong.
Okay. So did he give a reason why he came off duty while you were on duty to speak to you?
He said he wanted to address the AWOL, but there was no union rep present. He knew there was no union rep present. So that raised my level of concern in terms of his intent.
Yeah.
What he wanted to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
What he was trying to get from me. It raised very serious concerns.
And that makes complete sense, right?
Correct.
1 o'clock in the morning.
Correct. 1 o'clock in the morning.
You're a female officer, black or white, doesn't matter, right?
Correct.
You're a female officer.
Correct.
So you have a superior coming to see you with no warning, right? You didn't get like a pre-call.
No.
There was nothing scheduled with the union, which is illegal, right?
Correct.
You should not be speaking to a superior
It's against
officer.
my rights.
Exactly. About an incident without somebody present to represent you.
Correct.
So, okay, you guys are here. You're having this conversation.
Well, he does a lot of things. I get pulled into his office eventually. My lieutenant was very concerned about my rights being violated. Mm-hmm. My lieutenant was also newly transferred, so I didn't know him either. But my lieutenant raised concerns about the lack of union representation.
At that moment, so you gave somebody a call before you spoke?
I called.
Okay.
I spoke to the lieutenant. We had a sidebar. He said it can be a one-way conversation. Because in other words, when you're a police officer, you have to follow orders. Mm-hmm. You have to allow the superior to have a meeting with you. It's almost like I was cornered.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure there's he probably already knew that, right? Like if he comes to talk to you,
correct, then
he already knows that somebody will give you the best advice to have that conversation.
Well, he knows that I'm insubordinate if I say, I'm getting the hell out of here because I don't like this. This looks bad.
It's kind of a setup.
It's a setup.
Okay.
It's a setup.
So talk to us. So as you're having this conversation with him.
So he tries to bait me into a dialogue.
Okay.
He says, well, you should have came in. And and the reality is he didn't have the proper paperwork.
Okay.
If you're out injured and you haven't been medically cleared, it's not in anyone's best interest for you to return to work without the proper clearance.
Yep.
Period.
Yep. Which you had.
Which I had when I needed it, when I was being cleared.
Okay.
Obviously he didn't have it when he cleared me.
Okay.
So therein lies the difference.
So with this situation, what did it lead to, right? Because we're talking about how the situation kind of snowballed and led to your principal discharge. So we spoke about the AWOL, which then led to this situation, and I know you had kind of like a confrontation with this particular officer. Do you mind?
Well, it wasn't my confrontation. He tried to bait me.
Confrontation.
He tried to bait me into a conversation. He got agitated because he wasn't getting the response that he came in to get.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just as a person, I can imagine that he had frustrations building, that this AWOL wasn't going away on its own. He chose to carry me AWOL and take my wages.
Mm-hmm.
He understood that I had the right to file a state claim against him
Mm-hmm.
for taking my wages.
Mm-hmm.
He understood that if I'm returned back to work as I was per our schedule and our agreement, meaning all of the doctors, myself, we agreed upon a specific date. He understood that the onus is now on him.
Okay.
The accountability is on his shoulders for taking my wages and changing my work status.
Okay.
That's on him.
Okay.
So as I'm working and I choose not to vehemently pursue it, I did my job. I got a gun off the street. I apprehended an armed suspect. I think he was hoping that I would find a way to go out injured again. I would do something that would negate his error. That's what a person like him thinks like. And it didn't happen. So imagine being him. He was frustrated. So he came in,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to go on a fishing expedition. And I think that he just wanted to kind of bait me. I understood what he was trying to do, which was, again, all wrong. All wrong.
Okay.
And now it becomes my responsibility to not allow it to go where he wants it to go.
Okay.
That's my responsibility now. Why is it my responsibility?
Okay.
To make sure that
how did you handle that situation?
I allowed him to speak,
Okay.
and he started to get really agitated. He said, "You're not talking to me." Okay. I don't have a union rep present.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Wayne Gotten Rights. He was violating my rights.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually he said, "I'm going to suspend you tonight." Okay. So then he changes back. He says, "Well, wait a minute. You know, I just don't understand. I don't really want to have to suspend you." And I'm going to say this, you know, without getting into too much of what he said, according to the Mass General Law, civil service employees come under a certain statute.
Mm-hmm.
And he still needed to get everything signed off on before he pushed forward with a suspension.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My presumption, based on all the testimonies that we've had, all the hearings that we've had, is that he wanted to circumvent that.
Okay.
Again, to make the tables
Of
turn.
course, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. He's speaking to you without union representation. It's obvious that he wanted to.
Well,
get
more
around
importantly, something wasn't signed off on.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think he had a legal right to be there.
Okay.
I don't think he had a legal right to suspend me that night.
Okay. So once he decided that he said he's going to suspend you. All right. I don't want to suspend you. Then what happened after that?
He said, you know, "I want all your equipment, and that's including my loaded firearm.
Okay. So he wanted you to right there take off your badge.
Take off the badge,
give him
the
the
radio, all of that."
Okay,
But there's a step.
done.
There's a step with unloading your firearm. And I went and I proceeded to follow the administrative steps to unload my
Okay.
firearm.
So let's take a step back. You agreed. So once he
I
was
absolutely
like, okay, you're
agree.
like, okay, I'll give you my badge. I'll give you my gun.
Correct.
Okay. And then you started to follow the proper safety procedures
Right,
to hand your gun over.
right.
Okay. So talk to me about that.
So when I proceeded to do what he asked me,
Mm-hmm.
he got up from his desk and walked quicker than usual. Came over to me, walked quicker than usual, and I thought maybe he was watching to see if I was doing everything administratively and safely.
Mm-hmm.
And he reached out as I'm trying to, you know, unload my firearm. He reached out to me and he wrangled the gun out of the retention holster.
So he grabbed your gun.
He grabbed my gun. Wrangled. I say wrangled. The lieutenant said grab.
No, let's say
So I
that's
say
what it is,
wrangled
right?
because it's in a retention holster.
Okay, no, because so he had a hard time getting it out, right?
Because it's not designed to come out from the front.
All right.
Especially from someone standing in front of me, it's not designed to come out.
And so had you completed the proper safety procedures
I did
to
not.
make sure
There was
that
a live
the
round.
safety was on?
No, there was a live round in the chamber.
Okay, so he's endangering your life and his by trying to
everyone's life,
snatch the
even
gun
in
from
the
you.
station.
Oh, yeah, you're in a station, right?
Bullets can ricochet, guns discharge, guns jam, things happen to guns.
Okay,
That's why it's extremely important to follow safe protocol.
So he's wrangling for the gun. I'm sure what were you doing during this time? Like, did you eventually
I was
get
shocked.
the gun? How did it?
I was shocked.
How did it end, so to say?
It ended with him finally taking it out. The gun. They described the gun as getting stuck, meaning the lieutenant and the captain.
Okay.
It didn't get stuck. It was in a retention holster.
Okay.